Tropical Storm Debby has officially stalled out over the Carolinas and will be continuing to pose a severe flooding threat. However, a significant tornado threat will also happen as the storm begins to move up and off to the northeast. This is the current, what it looks like on the current satellite imagery. You can see it's very broken up here. You kind of have two sides to it. You've kind of these storms right here, and this is where that kind of tornado threat really ramps up today. For some tornadoes to happen, it could be a pretty localized tornado outbreak today, and we'll take a look at that in a minute. But I just wanted to point this out of how much dry air is kind of swooped in right here. It was much more disorganized yesterday. However, it has organized. It's definitely got its act back together, but there's just so much dry air and kind of just like moisture just uppercutting kind of the underside right here, preventing it from really kind of trying to come back together. And that happened all and that also happened when it was over the water as it began to head back inland. When it stalled over the water just off the coast of the Carolinas, there was so much dry air that it couldn't get its act together, so it couldn't re-intensify to, let's say, another hurricane. And that's what I do want to get into is the intensity guide, or the path. I'm sorry, we'll take a look at the intensity guide here in a second. Here's the projected path, and it will weaken down to a post-tropical storm or a depression in the next couple of hours. Is likely almost already at that point right now. And it will continue to move up and off to the northeast, and it will quickly ramp up in speed. For instance, it today at 2 p.m. Thursday, it's right here. By 8 p.m. Saturday, it'll already be all the way up into Canada, almost by Greenland. So it's gonna really kind of speed up as it moves up and off to the northeast, and it will bring some flooding realistically all along, basically here and into Canada. We're gonna take a look at that in a second. But I do want to point out the intensity guide here really fast. If we take a look at the intensity guide, it won't be it obviously it's going to weaken off. However, if we notice a trend, you can kind of see that most models are beginning to kind of project it back up, which is a little bit weird as it's going to stay on land mostly, but when it kind of moves up and out to the waters after it goes through Canada, this is when we could see it re-strengthen, but it will begin to kind of flatten out and eventually die off. However, more than likely, it will just stay below tropical storm force and eventually completely die off, and we will begin to stop talking about this, as it has been weeks now that we've actually been talking about Debby and its impacts that it has brought to the coast and Florida. So this is the future radar of the storm and what could happen. And what's to forecast, basically. We have a large 5% tornado risk outlined, kind of all over here. And this is for these storms right here that kind of come onto the coast. And as Debby moves up and off to the northeast, we'll have these storms kind of swing onto the coast. And this is that kind of tornado threat really begin to ramp up, especially kind of on this side right here. We still will have a ton of flooding, predominantly on the rain side where the eye used to be. But note that by about 8 p.m. today, that kind of swirly kind of side that kind of swirled side that almost looks like it wants to form an eye will completely kind of be all over the place. And this model has a lot of storms over here and possible some supercells kind of right over here in that 5% outlined begin to move up into that area for tornadoes. And this is where that possibility for a localized tornado outbreak to happen right here in the Carolinas, which cannot be ruled out with some heating, and we do have a chance for that. We will take a look at that here further in a second, but I do want to point out that there will be a significant flooding as this moves up into the northeast mid-Atlantic, such as Lake Pennsylvania and New York. As it moves up to the northeast, there will be some pretty good flooding and rainfall basically all along here. I mean, this would be bad, but this would be pretty bad. And I forgot to mention that line of storms that would happen today would eventually also kind of happen tomorrow, which would bring another chance for tornadoes tomorrow as well, as it swings up, following this kind of following now the post-tropical storm Debby. And eventually it'll move up into Canada, and eventually it'll swing out and become just rain showers, and eventually bring no virtual impacts in the coming future. So here is the rainfall totals, which I do want to note. As this moves up to the northeast, you'll see we will still see tremendous flooding, all basically kind of all out in front of the storm. Do note that even if these models say it's less, it's a rough estimate. This still could be more than what is forecasted. But I would kind of this area I'd say is really, it's a good estimate, as there is a high risk for flooding right in the Rocky Mountain region, extending back towards the coastline over here. So I again give or take some of these totals further south. I wouldn't be surprised if this side got a little bit more rainfall. However, I definitely think that in this kind of region right here, that's really kind of spot on for what could happen today in terms of flooding. So here's the tornadoes potentials I was talking about here. And this was the weather model from 1 p.m. You can see we do have relatively kind of high values, nothing that would pose a devastating outbreak. However, we do note that we do have some high values, and these values will continue to move up with the storm as it continues up, and it will kind of get like these flashes, kind of, so to speak, of high and then low. But there still is that kind of whole general risk, realistically, in this whole area for tornadoes and for those storms that will kind of hang down here later on today as they move up with the storm. Those storms that kind of hang, they will be in an atmosphere kind of prepared for them, so to speak. So when they form, they'll kind of be ready, and they could spark off some tornado warnings. Some tornado warnings, and possibly a few isolated ones. However, they should be relatively short-lived and weak, and cause realistically no damage whatsoever. Same with the significant tornado parameters. These are a little bit higher than than what I was looking at before, but nonetheless, there is still a relatively elevated tornado risk for today. Here's the Cape values for those storms. Like I said, Cape values are relatively low, so again, it shouldn't be anything too significant. To form all across the region. So yeah, that's all I have for you guys. And regarding Tropical Storm Debby, this will continue to bring some big impacts. However, I definitely think that this should calm down and begin to die off, and we will begin to start talking about more severe weather in the Midwest as activities beginning to ramp up. So stay tuned for that. So thank you guys so much for watching. Please, if you haven't already, like and subscribe, and I will see everybody in the next forecast.